Robert Daniel Willig was a giant in the world of industrial organization, but he was known by a one-word nickname, Bobby. He was the Tiger, Beyonce, Bono of antitrust economics, a legend for how smart he was, how quick his brain worked, his bat-like sleep patterns, and for the number of people like me whose lives he changed. His contributions to the antitrust space were remarkable. There is not an economic issue over the past 5 decades that Bobby didn't help shape. But perhaps his most significant contributions to the antitrust world were the 1992 merger guidelines. It was Bobby's influence that put economics squarely in the center of merger matters. And our economy is so much better off as a result. You've already heard this. It's impossible to talk about Bobby without talking about his legendary brain. It was like a supercomputer working at the fastest clock speeds, processing amazing amounts of information, always ahead of whomever he was talking to. And he knew that too. And he was different from economists in other ways. You know, some would say that economists are often dry or sometimes even boring, but not Bobby. Most work during daylight hours, but not Bobby. He worked when everyone else slept, and he slept when everyone else worked. He had a love for writing these eloquent poems for special occasions. And he loved to laugh, especially with his dear friend Janusz. And unlike many economists, Bobby loved to teach. He loved to teach anyone and everyone. And as a result, he inspired so many students, lawyers, judges, and others to have a passion for economics. Now, Bobby's impact on our firm and me personally are beyond description. It was his idea to actually name our firm Competition Policy Associates, or COMPASS for short. And I remember the moment he called, I believe Alex was in the room, his voice filled with so much pride that he had nailed it. And then it was his long-term relationship with John Click that helped bring COMPASS together with FTI, and then to help create the firm that we now have, COMPASS Lexicon. Now, I first met Bobby 35 years ago. I was probably a baby at the time. It was a few years later, when I wanted to take a year off from Princeton to work in government, that Bobby convinced my parents that that was a good idea. And when I wanted to stay in Washington to work at the White House, it was Bobby who convinced Princeton to give me credit for that. In fact, he served as my field study advisor. Now, a few years later, we ended up working on a consulting project together, and that started our truly special relationship. He took it under his responsibility to take me under his wing. And from that point forward, Ginny considered me, I think, to be Bobby's second wife. Bobby and I spoke almost every single day, oftentimes for hours, usually late at night, because that was when he did his best thinking. Now, this hasn't come up yet, but Bobby in his everyday life was always an economist. He has, I believe, the record for the most parking tickets in the history of Princeton. Why? It was his view that the cost of his time spent walking to the parking lot that had been assigned to him was greater than just parking right in front of the Woodrow Wilson School every single day and getting the expected parking ticket or 2 or 3. So every month he packaged up the tickets and he sent in an invoice effectively for his parking expenses. So he definitely lived the life that he had taught to his students about rationality. So now the torch has been passed, and his many, many disciples, many of whom are here today, have a special responsibility to carry on his legacy. And my promise to him and to Ginny, Jared, Scott, Brent, and Alex is that I will do everything I can to make that happen. And let me conclude by saying that the loss of such close friends, Bobby and Janusz, in such a short period of time is crushing. I miss them dearly. I miss their advice. I miss their mentorship. I miss being the young one. And I miss my daily calls with them. In the past year, I've wanted to call Bobby to just tell him about something that happened in a case or to get his advice. There are not many phone numbers I know by heart, but I know his. And there's nothing I wouldn't do to pick up the phone today and call 609-921-3457 to have one last call, one more piece of advice. There is some comfort knowing that my friends Janusz and Bobby are together again. I'm sure they're drinking a glass of wine. Janusz picked it. Chit-chatting about economic theory or some case or some person or some new paper. And they're certainly chuckling about the story of how they first met. And we are all better for that time we had with them. I'll miss you, Bobby.